cloth, he said, I am not doing. Then he asked him, well, I am also paying the money that you need, but why don't you do it for me? So that washerman, he went to the other communities and then told them that this is what he says. So immediately they caught hold of him, his parents, his children, his wife, and then they beat him up thoroughly. From then, such a social boycott was imposed upon the village, upon the whole Dalit community, and especially on this person, that they found very difficult to live. Now, one small incident triggers off all other aspects of a Dalit life. Socially, the whole community boycotted them, and the religious space was just taken away from them. And then the economic, the people would not be given any job, because the Dalit people, they were always depending on the dominant caste people there for their day-to-day life existence. Now everything is denied. So how one incident embodies the whole gamut of Dalit oppression, Dalit discrimination. So this is a very good example where Dalit constructs. But this person, he did not kind of border upon submissive consciousness. He went to the press, he went to the police, he went to the DSP, and then the collector brought out the issue, which means he did not want to buy the submissive consciousness as the given. But he wanted to create his own liberative consciousness, his own assertive consciousness. He tried to assert his space, socially, economically, politically, religiously, even culturally. So this is the way a person constructs a submissive consciousness or an oppressive consciousness. So this, I find this is a very good example for that.
Professor Luna, then, how do you conceptualize the philosophy of liberation with reference to the Dalits?
Now that's important project with the very enabling of Dalit consciousness in terms of the question of liberation. I think the whole issue of philosophy of liberation of the Dalits in terms of helping themselves, by helping themselves, helping this Indian social context, the caste discriminated society, I think they project a serious sensibility, a philosophy of liberation. Now the whole philosophy of liberation has to be understood from the point of view of a philosophy of domination. Dalit as people, I told at the beginning, their consciousness has been subjugated by both internal and external factors, which means there is a strong philosophy, culturally, historically, to some major extent philosophically, dominated their consciousness and allowed them to suffer a sense of subjugated consciousness. In other words, there is a specific sense of a philosophy of domination that is operative within the context of caste with reference to the Dalit category as people. What is this philosophy of domination? How do I look at the whole issue of philosophy of domination within the Indian cultural context? Say, for example, the caste context, what Professor Selvaraj was telling about. I look at the whole principle like this. Between two people within Indian caste culture, X and Y, the X, the individual self, has been historically, philosophically construed as a superior self. You call it in different terms. You call it the singular self, you call it the dual self, the Prakriti and the Purusha, or you call it the individual self in different terminologies. In other words, the X category is construed philosophically as a superior category as against the Y category as an inferior category, the secondary category. So there is a category which is constructed as the primary, and there is a category which is constructed philosophically as a secondary category. Between this X and Y category, there has been philosophical justifications, which we call the whole metaphysical question. We have metaphysics that upheld monistic principle, the primacy of the superiority of the self. We have metaphysics in terms of dualistic category, the primacy of the self and the secondary position of the matter. In other words, to the consciousness of the Dalits, in terms of constructing a philosophy of liberation, this question of the logic of domination is a serious issue which is to be considered in philosophy. Not only the Dalit question is a social question. The Dalit question is not only a cultural question. The Dalit question is a seriously philosophical question from the point of view of the logic that constructs a serious sense of slavery, a serious sense of domination. What is this logic of domination? That between X and Y, between this X principle and Y principle, X principle has been metaphysically, culturally construed as the dominant principle, as and against the Y principle as the to be dominated principle, which means X is culturally invested, assumes a sense of power over Y. Y, I refer the Dalit category, the women of the patriarchy, the Dalit within the caste category, the common within the professional category. Therefore, there is a logic of domination, the Dalit consciousness against the subjugation has to be worked out. So the first principle within the whole construction of a philosophy of liberation with reference to the Dalit question of liberation is to take into account what are those philosophical principles that constitute this sense of domination. I think that's a very serious inquiry into the entire gamut of philosophy. There's a very serious ongoing research inquiry that has to be taken into account to constitute the whole question of what are those philosophical principles that keeps them under consciousness slavery. I am not just talking about the slavery in terms of untouchability, which is a serious problem, but slavery in terms of consciousness constituted within the Indian philosophical construct. I think the Dalit philosophy as a philosophy of the marginalized with reference to suggesting a philosophy of liberation problematizes the very philosophical constructs themselves. It is a metaphysics against metaphysics. It's a kind of a search for a logic of liberation against the logic of domination. The logic of liberation or the principles of liberation that goes to constitute the question of Dalit liberation is not exclusively for the Dalit people. In fact, we need to appreciate, understand the Dalit category not in the sense of a reference to a caste category. Dalit means an anti-caste category. Dalit is not categorization of caste category. Dalit refers to against any social discrimination. In that way, Dalit is a discourse that X and Y needs to be what we call brought under for a discussion. Therefore, it's not a discussion of a particular category, class of people, that it is their interest. And it's the interest of the common person, it's the interest of the academicians, it is the interest of the professional, because the Dalit looks at the issue of domination, that both X is dominated or subjugated, because his consciousness is subjugated within the metaphysics of domination, and Y is also consciousness is dominated within the metaphysics of the slave domination. Therefore, the question of philosophy of liberation takes into account seriously the philosophical principles that go to constitute, justify, sanctify the philosophies of domination. This is on the one side of it. There are other principles that needs to be accounted. For example, the question of identity, which Professor Selvaraj was discussing. From the point of view of Dalit reality, Dalit philosophy of liberation, identity is no more singular. Self is no more individual, and the question of liberation is no more individual liberation in terms of individual mukti. The Dalit looks at the whole question of liberation totally from a different angle. That's why I said the Dalit search within the area of philosophy is to problematize the very philosophy. So it's a very insightful search, very needed search, and a socially relevant search within the philosophical dimensions. In that sense, the question of identity for the Dalits is plural. Identity, he looks at it not as a singular caste category of this X, Y category. Identity is a relational category. Dalit is a relational category. Dalit is a collective category. In other words, it works towards a communitarian plurality of selves as identities. In that sense of relationality, I think the whole context of a philosophy of liberation of the Dalits has to be located. And that is a very serious search that has to be taken into account.
Well, Professor Lu, now you have spoken also about some aspects of the principles, and I would definitely request Dr. Silviraj to clearly tell us about some of the basic principles that construct the philosophy of liberation.
Yeah, it's very important from where Dr. Lourdenathan stopped. From the foregoing discussions, we clearly know the movement from submissive consciousness to assertive consciousness, or what we call liberative consciousness. So this is the clear movement we have to see with regard to Dalit consciousness, construction of Dalit consciousness. Now, what are the agents, or what are the principles that really construct this assertive or liberative consciousness? From my own research, I've come across 4 important agents or principles that construct collective liberative Dalit consciousness. One is education. When I was talking to people, making surveys, everybody said education is the master key to Dalit liberation. Education is the master key to Dalit empowerment. It means education operates at 2 levels. At the material level, it operates a clear vehicle for social mobility. When Dalits are deprived of any other possessions, the only vehicle for them to social mobility is education. And also at the second level, it creates a critical consciousness within them. How I am, why I am, and where should I move? So this kind of a questions it raises. Education does that. That is why people said that education becomes the master key to Dalit liberation, to Dalit liberative consciousness. The second one is a sense of history, Dalit history. Now, most of the problems for the people is because they do not know who they are. They do not know where they come from. They do not know why they are here now. So, a clear sense of history, a historical consciousness creates in them an empowered self. Now, this is what I am. I have been in this status because of somebody else. So, I have to protest. I have to resist it. So a sense of history brings a collective liberative consciousness of the Dalits. Then also you have got the social movements. Social movements play a very crucial role in constructing especially collective consciousness, because a Dalit as an individual feels himself as a submissive being. But when he is related to other people in terms of a social movements, when they come together and then see that they are a big group, and they have power, they have potential. So this mobilization or social movements becomes the embodiment of a Dalit power. And then related to that is a Dalit leadership. Dalit leadership, even after 60 years, now today Dalits speak of Dr. Ambedkar, because he becomes embodiment of an ideal leadership for Dalit emancipation, for Dalit empowerment. And also today you see a lot of leadership coming up from every state. Now you take UP. Now it is Kanshiram who gave a sense of political identity to the people, and that is a kind of a powerful tool, a powerful collective tool, collective Dalit self. And then we also see a kind of people coming together as a power. It is not, I am not sitting alone, I am not standing alone, but I am connected to people. Now I am not one, I am many. So this sense of collective self gives them a power to protest, gives them a power to assert, gives them a power to demand. So it's no more kind of begging, it's no more kind of a getting for some concessions, but it is claiming for my right, it is claiming for my share. And all this happen